Yeah. Okay. All right. Right. First of all, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some of us as well, distinguished scholars and delegates. Welcome to our awesome JHTM birthday celebration webinar. Yeah. So, my name is Edmund, and I'm the associate editor with JHTM. Yeah. So before we begin, our editor-in-chief, Professor Mariana Sigala, has prepared a short video for all of us uh, to celebrate the JHTM's 30th anniversary. So I'm going to play this video. It's a very short video, just to kind of showcase what we have done and some of the important metrics that we have achieved over the last 30 years. Okay, so enjoy. Yeah.
30 years on the rise. Journal of HTM shines. In tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 30 years on the rise. Journal of HTM shines. In tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 7.6 impact score, but we strive to do more. In hospitality's growth, we're opening new doors. To the field we commit, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. To the field we commit, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. To the field we commit, building insights that fit. For researchers to grow, we lead and we transmit. 30 years on the rise, Journal of HTM shines. In tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide. 30 years on the rise, Journal of HTM shines. In tourism and events, sharing knowledge worldwide.
Okay. All right, there you go. You close this. Okay. Oops, I think I lost my screen. Just give me one sec. Okay. All right, as you can see, we have come a long way. So once again, welcome everyone. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to JHTM's Online Research Festival 2024. This year, as we can see, it's a very special occasion for the journal as we celebrate 30 years of awesome publications, in tourism and hospitality. Yeah. JHTM, as we know, is the official journal of COTI, the Council for Australasian Tourism and Hospitality Education. This journal is committed to a broad range of topics, including tourism and travel management, leisure and recreation studies, and emerging fields of event management. Yeah. At JHTM, we have papers that contains both theoretical and applied research and encourage submission of the results of collaborative research between academia and industry. Yeah. And it's very important to also go through some of the important metrics of JHTM. JHTM has moved through journal rankings over the last 30 years. It is now ranked a Q1 journal and ABDC A ranking journal. Yep. And ranked within the top 10 journals in hospitality and tourism with an SSCI impact factor of 7.6. Yep. And on average, JHTM attracts 2,000 plus submissions annually. So of course, once again, on behalf of our chief editor, Mariana, thank you for all your support as reviewers, authors, and your editorial board members' activities. Please continue to support JHTM and submit quality manuscripts to the journal. Yeah, okay. So, as part of our 30th anniversary celebrations, we have a series of 7 exciting webinars that take place between in the months of October and November. And today, you are very fortunate because our theme today is about progress and usefulness of cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality experiences. Yeah, this theme is very important, and at the same time, it actually do provide provocative insights and debates about consumer psychology and experiences. Yeah, so some of us will be asking this question, like, why is this topic so relevant to JHTM's 30th anniversary? Yep. Well, the answer to this is in the past decades, tourism researchers, for example, like Professor Noah Scott, have increasingly focused on studying the mental phenomena associated with travel outside a visitor's normal environment rather than only behavior. So in part, this is because new sources of data that we have seen from the use of cognitive psychology and neuroscience are available to inform our theories about mental concepts considered to be antecedents of behavior. Therefore, it really begs the questions about how useful, the usefulness of cognitive psychology in informing discussions of mental phenomena which occurs during tourism experiences, such as emotions, memories, and consciousness. Yeah. So to answer these important questions, we have invited 5 distinguished experts, yep, in the field of cognitive psychology. Yep. Unfortunately, one of the experts, yes, was sick today. Yep. So Jaga will not be joining us. Um, and collectively, these 5 distinguished experts, they have published over 500 publications. So I went to their Google profile and scholarly profile and counted number of publications, more than 500 publications with more than 25,000 citations, which mainly came from Nova Scott. Yeah. Um, so the format of this webinar is going to be each panelist represent, yeah, for between 15 to 20 minutes. And we will leave some time at the end for Q&A. In the meantime, if you have any burning questions that you really wanted to ask, please feel free to use our the chat box function. Yep, and to enter your questions, which I will be monitoring as we go along. Yeah. So I'm going to introduce the 4 distinguished speakers first, and then I'll invite them to present. Okay. So our very first speaker is Dr. Ryan Yung from Greenwich University. Yep. So I guess I do know Ryan quite well. Yeah, he's one of the leading experts in digital innovation and transformation within tourism marketing, with a specific focus on extended realities. Yep. He has published numerous journal articles and book chapters, and delivered master classes all around the world. Yep. And has collaborated with key industry bodies, including Queensland Department of Innovation, Queensland Tourism Industry Council, and Destination Gold Coast. Yep, on cutting-edge technological innovation projects. So today, Dr. Yong will be presenting on the topic about, as you can see, is VR more than just a stimulus of emotions in cognitive psychology? All right. And then we have our second speaker, yep, Professor Noah Scott, yep, who is with Griffith Uni and Edith Cowan University. Yep. As you can see, Professor Noah Scott is one of the very distinguished professors in this area, and he is a fellow COTI member. Yep. With over 210 published academic articles and 13 books, he is the undisputed expert in tourism, experiences, and destination management. Yep. Professor Scott has supervised 19 successful doctoral students and serves on the editorial board of 10 leading journals. Before his academic career, Professor Scott held senior roles, including Manager of Research and Strategic Services at Tourism and Events Queensland. And I guess today he will be really talking about giving us a whole sort of synthesis, yeah, about insights on the historical use of theory in tourism and the intersection with cognitive psychology. Yep, and where does cognitive psychology fits in? Yep. So stay tuned for that. Yep. And our third speaker, we have Dr. Anna Campos from the University of Agra. I hope I pronounced it correctly. I've been trying to do that ever since. With the Faculty of Economics. Yeah. And she's a dedicated researcher at the Research Center for Tourism, Sustainability, and Well-being in Portugal. So Dr. Campos has made significant contributions to tourism research, focusing on tourism marketing and management, tourist psychology, experience design, and co-creation. Yep, so she's one of the leading researchers and experts in co-creation. So today, as you can see, her topic really touched on these aspects of cognitive psychology, which is about co-creation of a tourism experience that we are all really very much involved in our everyday lives and in our research. Okay. Now, of course, our final speaker, is Professor Billy Song from Curtin Uni, School of Management and Marketing. Professor Billy Song, is a leader in consumer research, neuromarketing, and consumer biometrics. He has consulted for major industry partners, including Red Bull, Lottery West, and Harvey Beef. His groundbreaking work on emotions and psychosociology spans across multidisciplines, earning him the prestigious awards such as the Australian Young Tall Poppy Award. That is one of the most prestigious award for scientists in Western Australia. Professor Song also leads the Curtin University's Consumer Research Lab, where they specialize in cutting-edge biometric measures like eye tracking and brainwave analysis. My goodness. So today, his topic is really going to be discussing about the neuroscience and cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality, and what are some of the applications and caveats behind this. Okay. So I'm not going to hog the mic. Time waits for no man or woman. So I'm going to pass on the floor to our very first speaker, Dr. Ryan Yong.
Thanks, Edmund. Let's see if this goes well. Is that all okay? Yep. All right. Thank you, Edmund, and thank you, everybody, for the very kind introduction. I think putting me here is already stretching the boundaries of the word expert. So let's see how we go. I also want to apologize in advance. We're in London here, where it's midday, and after this, I'm going to have to run and teach 4 hours, right? The joys of academia. I would have loved to stay and listen to, experts in the area like Noel, Anna, and Billy, who undoubtedly their perspectives will help myself as well in my career. But so I'm Dr. Ryan Yeung. As Edmund very kindly said, an expert in the extended realities area, specifically in tourism experiences or the visitor economy or experience economy, if we like. I currently serve as the Deputy Director for the Tourism and Marketing Research Center here at the University of Greenwich. And today I'm going to be speaking about extended realities or virtual reality, specifically how emotions, I have used it in my own research, as well as looking a little bit into the future and mental travel and research approaches to these potential future directions for virtual travel. I also want to start with a huge caveat. When Edmund invited me to speak on this panel, I have never, quote unquote, picked a side to be on cognitive psychology or behavioral psychology, right? So any of my forays into this space is not explicit, although when I am interested in the area, and when I've read, I think what I am doing is somewhat in this area, although I'm sure Noel and Billy will correct me. I also think maybe this may serve as a bad example of how not to use or cross behavioral as well as cognitive psychology. So in my presentation, I'm going to go over three things. Firstly, we're going to just give you the context. So what exactly am I speaking about in terms of extended reality and virtual reality? I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my past research projects, the way I combine the concept of presence and how that affects emotion. And then I'm going to look forward and see how I've brought that into what I'm doing currently and potentially in the future as well, to look at things like the virtual experience economy and how potentially the future of virtual tourism as well as virtual events may be affected by research approaches to this area. So very quickly, extended reality, it's a catch-all term that combines any extension of reality, as the name states. Virtual reality in this seminal continuum will sit on the right, and augmented reality sits on the left. So a good way of looking at this, and this is how Microsoft explained it to me, basically, is when we look at virtual reality, we think of ourselves stepping into the virtual world, whereas when we look at augmented reality, it's elements of the virtual and digital world that comes into the real world. So as you would expect, virtual reality sits on the right, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on today, on the right side of this continuum. Now, some key aspects of virtual reality is the visualization. So the user should be able to look around within this virtual environment, usually with a head-mounted device. One of the most recent ones is the example I've put here, the Apple Vision Pro. There also should be some form of immersion where the experience is helping the user suspend belief or suspend disbelief, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And there, in my own research opinion, there must be some sort of interactivity where the user must have some degree of control or ability to manipulate the experience, normally using controllers or using, as Apple has very clearly shown recently, motion detection of our faces as well as our hands. So in my own research, as well as research into the area of virtual reality, it is dominated by the concept of presence or various approaches to the concept of presence. You may also have heard people refer to this as the concept of telepresence, and more recently with the rise of metaverses, the challenge of achieving high social presence. For the first half of this presentation, I'm going to focus a lot more on telepresence. The definition of telepresence is the feeling where your body is physically located in one place, where your mind is then located in a different place. When this sense of presence is high enough, users will get the sense of being there. So there being the virtual environment. And again, when the sense of presence is high enough, they will start to feel this perceptual illusion of non-mediation. So as with any computer-mediated communication, such as virtual reality, when the sense of presence is not high enough, we are well aware, such as we are doing here now, that I am communicating with the rest of you through a computer. When sense of presence reaches a high enough level, this starts to kind of melt away, and that's why you get the illusion of non-mediation, where your brain, I guess, starts to forget that you are actually looking at this through a computer screen. So for us, especially in tourism marketing, as well more recently, actual virtual tourism, the effect of this is that you will start to feel like you have visited this place rather than just looked at pictures of it, which is common in traditional marketing. So again, very quickly, just to go through the determinants of presence that I've been studying for a little while. And here's where I think it crosses into cognitive psychology because a lot of the terms, although I know in Noel's paper, he did mention that terminology used is very flimsy, especially when we borrow theories from outside tourism. But immersion is a huge one. And well, as immersion, some of you may know, is definitely achievable using traditional media like TVs, where if you're looking directly at the stimuli, you are able to have a sense of immersion. But as soon as your eye line drifts outside of the stimuli, for example, that sense of immersion is lost because you are almost snapped back to reality by the fact that you're looking at the wall behind your TV instead of being immersed in the experience. Obviously, with virtual reality, the argument is that the immersion is significantly higher because the picture or the stimuli moves around with your eyesight as you move around instead of being a static picture. The second determinant for telepresence is sensory fidelity, and this is the degree to which the virtual environment accurately represents the real world. Without going into too much detail, I'll jump straight to the final point where a good enough level of sensory fidelity will give the user the feeling that the social and cultural cues that are within the virtual environment match your expectations. And what I mean by this is we use the word reality here and real world fairly loosely because as long as the experience is consistent to what is being portrayed, then sensory fidelity can still be at a high enough level. So for example, if you are on a virtual environment that takes you to the moon, then obviously that is not the real world. But if everything in that space behaves as you would expect it to on the moon, then the level of sensory fidelity can still be achieved. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the sense of engagement. And this is also the level of practically involvement and interactivity that is being presented to the user. So research has shown us that when the engagement levels are high enough, this is shown by the virtual environment much more so than the real world starting to take up primary position in the user's consciousness or attention. This is often achieved or is also known as like a flow state, right? When you are particularly engaged and involved in a stimuli or an activity, and before you know it, because you are no longer paying attention to the real world and things like time passing, you would have spent 6 hours playing a video game and the sun is rising before you know it. And so importantly as well, this high enough level of engagement is transforming a user from a spectator to a participant in the actual stimuli. And we see this again most often in video games, whereas a high enough level of engagement, involvement actually will lead to a high level of presence. And when people have high level of presence, enjoyment, and want to continue the experience. But in my own research, what I was looking at is so achieving this sense of presence with the determinants that I've explained so far, but then how presence and emotion then intersect and associate. And this really came from the realm of cyber psychology, where they've been studying this phenomena for quite a while now. In cyber psychology, the main approach to using VR well, it's still ongoing really, is the theory that when the presence levels are higher, they can also trigger a more intense emotional response. So in cyber psychology and PTSD, especially, for example, this is the goal, right? To achieve a high level of negative emotional response so that therapists can then show these veterans how to deal with that negative emotional response. In my case, obviously, in tourism, it's not that serious. So I thought if this works in negative emotion, it theoretically should work as well with a higher presence level and a higher positive emotional response. And so this is I'm not sure if I'm sharing my sound. Let me see. But anyway, even if there's no sound, this clip is very visual. So it's a perfect encapsulation of a high enough presence level using virtual reality, being able to trigger a high enough negative emotional response. So yeah, perfect encapsulation there, right? High enough presence level using virtual reality was enough to trigger in his case, obviously fear of heights response and associated negative emotional reaction to that piece of stimuli. And so then taking this into my own research is basically doing the same thing, but in the opposite, which is where I want to basically test whether a high enough level of presence will be able to also increase the positive emotional response. And I have absolutely no intention to go into the various critical discussions around measuring emotion. So I took the most simple way, which is just measuring valence and arousal. And in this case, the context was a cruise ship, which we worked with Princess Cruises at the time, where they were launching this cruise ship called the Majestic Princess. And what they wanted to achieve was, well, in short, they wanted to start selling tickets to this cruise experience before the cruise ship was built. And so they approached my industry partners, Digital Frontier, to build this cruise ship in virtual reality and then get people to use virtual reality to experience the cruise ship. And my job in this case was to compare this virtual reality experience to pictures and videos of the exact same experience of this cruise ship that was going to launch in the future. Long story short, presence levels were significantly higher, as you can probably expect in virtual reality when compared to videos and pictures. Virtual reality here in the gray. And same thing as well with the pleasure and arousal responses to the different stimuli. So virtual reality significantly higher, once again, compared to videos and pictures, which, yes, proved the hypothesis that a higher presence level can affect a higher emotional level. This is perhaps contentious because I know it strays in a little bit into the behavioral psychology sector, but then as the final thing I found was, yes, intention to visit the Majestic Princess, intention to recommend, but most interestingly was intention to recommend the marketing stimuli even for people who had no intention to go on a cruise ship anytime soon. So some implications here, just based on one part of this experiment, the t-test, we can conclude that VR was more effective than traditional media for this specific case. So again, yeah, one more thing to add to that is the stimuli that I used was exactly the same because there was no real pictures of the cruise ship anyway. So it's the exact same stimuli used across the pictures, videos, and VR. And yeah, as I said earlier, even when participants were not interested to visit, they were still interested to recommend this marketing stimuli to their friends and family. But then I dug deeper beyond regression. I found what was more interesting was when I also added in the qualitative component. So this was a mixed method study. And I wanted to understand why basically this was happening with my participants. One of the first things that constantly came to mind was forced engagement through immersion. So when they were looking at pictures and videos of this stimuli, some of them got bored. And what they would do is look down at their phones, right? So that immediately broke immersion or broke engagement with, someone has very kindly added to my slides here. Yeah, but then when they were in the virtual reality headset, there was no way to basically break immersion because even when you look down, there is no such thing as looking away from the stimuli, if that makes sense. So during the whole 3 to 5 minute experience, they were basically forced to engage with the stimuli. But then in the second and third one, which perhaps comes a little closer to cognitive psychology, is this sense of control and agency. That was the difference between the 3 different types of stimuli. So a lot of my participants equated this to being in the back seat of a car versus driving the car itself, right? So with pictures and videos, they felt that these are pictures and videos that you want me to see, and therefore I have absolutely no control or agency over what I am actually interested in. Whereas with virtual reality, they said, now it feels like I'm actually driving the car, right? I actually want to see what interests me. And so this also blended in a little bit with goal congruence, whether it's their own existing motivations and beliefs, or in the short term, what interests them in terms of a cruise ship or cruise experience, for example. So some of them wanted to pay more attention, spend 5 minutes in the central deck area, right? That was the most important thing to them. Some of them spend 5 minutes just looking at the balcony size or the bed size or the bathtub size. So again, different things for different people. And that affected as well their, I suppose, interest and consequently their emotional response to the stimuli. And so this was the final framework that we came up with. There's an extended version of this, but probably not very relevant to the presentation today. And I'm going to basically end the presentation with a couple of research approaches that I think to virtual experience economy and approaching the measurement of tele and social presence in the future of this area, virtual tourism and virtual events. So what I've been doing basically in extending from that project is actually looking now directly at virtual tourism. Over here, what we're trying to do is no longer use virtual reality to market physical sites, right? The new approach, or what we're moving towards now, is where the virtual experience is the destination. So in things like historical sites and metaverses, I'm currently working with a company called Flyover Zone, where they're basically recreating these medieval cities to the times of their prime, right? So there really is no way actually to visit these historical sites as they were in that space in real life anyway. And so we shouldn't be looking at it as complements, but rather as replacements to some of these sites. There's also compensatory experiences to some of these sites as well, whether it's because people have disabilities and unable to actually visit these sites physically, or travel and physical restrictions, such as sites being damaged by natural disasters or over-tourism and whatnot. But also at the same time, another aspect that I'm looking at is the sense of social presence, right? Because one thing that we've started to see as well is this movement into virtual events where a lot of, I don't want to use age as a denominator, but younger people are more and more hanging out in these metaverses. And correlated to that, I guess, is the fact that a lot of big artists are now doing these virtual concerts within spaces like Fortnite and things like that, and achieving huge numbers like 20 million attendees, which is literally not possible in real life. And so when we bring all of these things together, it actually all comes down to the same goal that these developers, as well as trying to adapt these experiences, are trying to achieve, and is essentially the embodied experience. So as we know it today, and perhaps closer to traditional tourism as well as traditional concert experiences, is getting that bodily and therapeutic pleasure through escape from everyday living, such as being able to run around at a concert hall where you otherwise wouldn't be able to do so. Obviously, what I'm looking at now is we are escaping through mental from everyday living, right? Through going to these virtual concerts as well as virtual tourism experiences. And here is, again, I think where it strays a little bit into cognitive psychology, where our thoughts, emotions, and perceptions are influenced then by our physical state and sensory experiences. This obviously gets a little bit tricky because as the technology stands today, much of virtual reality only stimulates the visual and auditory senses, right? So here, again, same thing. It's going to be interesting to see how things like escapism or transient social identities or sense of intimacy and ritual actions translate into the virtual setting. And coming back to the research approaches then. So yeah, again, it's a shame I can't listen to what Noel and especially Billy is going to say about cognitive psychology here. Because really the study of tele and social presence remains largely unsolved beyond self-reporting and surveys. In my previous project, what I tried to do was involve things like EEG to actually measure the brain waves while people were in these virtual sites. But the combination of the headsets plus the cost of EEG means that I wasn't able to do so. But again, just to give you a bit of background around trying to measure tele and social presence, the one way of doing it is a self-report after the experience has finished. But then obviously this doesn't actually have the minute detail of how people are going in and out of tele and social presence during these virtual experiences. And another way of doing it is they put a button or pen and paper in your hand, and you actually start to mark as you are within the experience itself. But when I mentioned earlier, one of the determinants of presence is immersion, and the simple act of writing on a piece of paper while you're in the virtual environment actually breaks that immersion and presence. So the measurement of this is still really difficult, I guess, largely unsolved. So second point here, until XR haptics significantly improve, the experiences add another layer to mental phenomena, right? Because basically how this moves forward will rely on research insights as well as how this mental transportation to these virtual environments will be studied. And then I tried to connect this directly to some of the cognitive psychology concepts that are to the fore. And yeah, it will be interesting to see if I watch this back later, Noel, Anna, and Billy's approaches to some measurements of this flickering between like attention, emotional response, and memory as people spend extended amount of time within these virtual environments, how much their attention flick back and forth, or how do their emotional response in turn fluctuate throughout these experiences. And yeah, so any of these approaches, and I think increasingly to explore the black box of cognitive psychology is going to be absolutely crucial to adaptation and further understanding of these future virtual worlds. Again, it's a potential future for at least one segment of society for travel in the future and leisure. And I'll end with this, right? So I'm speaking a lot about virtual experiences and virtual reality, but really this is going to just keep moving forward, and associated presence levels as well as emotional levels as we move from communication of information and experiences from audio only, video, audio, the internet, social media, now virtual reality, and whatever comes next. And that is it from myself. So thank you very much for your time.
All right. Cool. Thanks a lot, Ryan. That was a very interactive and great insights towards what we're talking about today. I guess, just looking at what you have presented, kind of reminds me about the sense of presence where, you mentioned that, your body is in one place and it takes your mind away to another. And I'm not sure if any of you guys can remember, but sort of like 15 or 20 years ago, there was this concept of the silent disco, whereby you actually went to a disco and gave you headphones, and you had to try to make some sense of getting involved in that experience, without talking to anyone, but just with the headphone sets on at a silent disco. Yeah, and I think we have gone leaps and bounds away from the silent disco to maybe hopefully a virtual reality disco one day. Yeah. All right. But thanks a lot, Ryan, for sharing with us your great research and insights. Yep. So if you have any questions for Ryan, please feel free to put it down in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them. If not, get Ryan to maybe address them personally through email and so on. All right. But once again, thanks a lot, Ryan, for the great presentation. All right. So, and next, moving on, we have our distinguished expert, like Professor Noah Scott. Yep, who is going to share with us his presentation on about the historical perspectives on the use of theory in tourism and how cognitive psychology fits in there. Yep. So, Professor Scott, whenever you're ready, please feel free to go ahead
Thanks,
with the
Edmund.
presentation.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, Ryan. That was a very interesting talk, and yeah, I've got a few comments that I'll make during my presentation about this idea of presence and what you're talking about. But it sounds very interesting, and you seem quite successful in that area, which is wonderful. So I'll share my screen. Here we are, and they'll just make it bigger. Okay. So thanks, everyone. I think my topic's changed a little bit, but it's still about cognitive psychology. And let's just step back a bit, okay? So in tourism, tourism is a field of study. And as a field of study, it doesn't have its own theory, okay? It gets ideas or theories from other disciplines, psychology, for example, or sociology, or economics, lots of them. Jafari talked about that back in the 1980s. And so the theories that we're using come from, and I'm going to particularly focus on psychology. Same thing works for sociology or other areas. But so if you think about what theories we're using in psychology, traditionally, they have come from what I call behavioral psychology. And there's some reasons for that. The reason is that when tourism first started as a discipline or as a field of study in the 1960s, so this was after World War II, tourism was growing, jumbo jets, and so tourism was becoming an interesting thing to study. Academics started to study it, and they needed some theories, so they used the dominant theories of the time. They used psychology, and the dominant theories in psychology at that time were behavioral. Basically, they were all based around the idea that we can't understand what's happening in our head. Okay, and that there's nothing wrong with that. The problem, though, is that psychology moved on to having a lot deeper understanding of how our brain works and how our mental processes operate, as we've just seen by Ryan talking about all these interesting studies that he's doing. So in some of the branches of psychology, they started using these new ideas. They were studying how our brain worked, and they came up with a lot of theories which we now call cognitive psychology to distinguish it from studying behavior without anything to do with how our brain's working. So cognitive psychology is a good way, has got 50, 60 years or more of expertise in studying how our brain works. And these difficult concepts like presence, because the thing about presence is it's primarily mental. It's happening in our head, which then determines how we behave. So because I'm imagining something in my head, but I'm balancing on a piece of wood, I'm thinking that I'm actually on the edge of a cliff, and that determines my behavior. So my thinking determines my behavior. So the idea of cognitive psychology is simply to understand more about the things that cause behavior and which sit between the real world outside and our behavior. And that was traditionally, for behavioral psychologists, a black box, and cognitive psychologists have been studying it for a long time. Now, I just want to start off by saying one thing, and this is really important. Every type of discipline or subdiscipline has its own assumptions. So if you're a behavioral psychologist, then you assume that you can't understand what's happening in our head. Okay, that's what goes along with your study. If you're a sociologist, you believe that society, in large part, causes behavior through concepts like culture, like role, and so on. So these are social concepts which sociologists think cause our behavior. So if you are a cognitive psychologist, you want to use cognition, then cognition causes behavior. You can't study how stimulus causes a response without understanding what goes in the middle, how our mental processes work. So that's why the SOR theory, stimulus organism response theory, which came from environmental psychology, is actually wrong, because as much as it says the organism is involved, it doesn't explain what's happening in our brain. And typically it's used in tourism as if it's stimulus response. But anyway, so the basic idea is the first thing you have to believe if you want to do cognitive psychology is say behavior is caused by our own thinking, not by the environment. And the second issue that's really important, what 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 cognitive psychologists have found is that the way we think happens really quickly. And what we're thinking about now is different to what I'm thinking about now. And a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes means that the context of my thinking is changing. Every time I move perhaps to a different situation or even the same situation later, what I'm trying to achieve in that situation, my goal, what I want to do has changed. And if your goals change, then your behavior will change. One of the major problems in behavioral psychology is that they tended to think that our motivation or our values or our beliefs remained fairly stable over time, over the long time. And what we now know, and that was the theory that lay behind the theory of planned behavior. The theory of planned behavior said, how I'm going to act in this situation, it will always be the same. And it was used to study seatbelts because seatbelt behavioral responses, whether they're put on a seatbelt or not, were pretty stable. But unfortunately, if you're studying tourism and goals and experiences and things which are constantly changing, where my goals might change from when I'm away from home to when I am at home, or this time of the day to that time, then my goals are changing and how I respond will change. This, of course, is the reason why the theory of planned behavior doesn't predict environmental responsibility. Often in a situation like a national park, if you ask a person, will you recycle? They'll say yes, but then put them in another situation where their goals are different, their situation's different, they will still want to recycle, but they won't. There'll be some other problem. So theory of planned behavior is incorrect. SOR is incorrect. If you want to use cognitive psychology, think about how our current thinking determines behavior. What's happening? Why isn't it moving on? My screen has stopped. I don't know why. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, for some reason. Oh, no, there you are. I don't know what happened. For some reason, my screen is very slow. Okay. I'll have to just bear with me a second. Oh, what's happened? Okay. So parametric assumptions. So how tourism. Can you share? Am I sharing my screen again?
No.
How about now?
Yes. All right. Yep.
Yep. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Okay, so why is cognitive psychology relevant to tourism? Well, tourism involves self-selected behavior. You're not forced to go on a holiday. So what you tend to do on a holiday is engage in something which you want to do. We'll call that a goal. So your goal is to enjoy yourself, to go learn something, to experience an overseas culture. But the point is, you selected that yourself, and that makes it really important to you. The second thing about it is that it involves, by definition, going to a novel environment. Those two things mean that it is um, going to be related to more highly aroused emotions, positive emotions. So your tourism is likely for most people to be something that they enjoy because it involves doing something that they want to do. And it's likely to be something which is a bit exciting, not because it involves going to something new, something novel. Those two things mean that you will have stronger emotions during tourism on average. So, firstly, the context of tourism means that it has to be that it's going to involve emotion. The second thing is that many of the things that tourism researchers are interested now in, such as flow, presence, attention, uh, things like mindfulness, memorable tourism experiences, transformation, identity transformation from a holiday, all of those more recent things that tourism people have been studying are all about things that happen in our head. They're not about our behavior. Okay. So that means that if you want to study these things, you should be thinking about the discipline or the type of psychology that studies mental processes. And what cognitive psychology does, its scope, its domain of academic interest are attention, perception, emotion, memory, consciousness, and learning, actually. So all of those things, the things that tourism people are particularly interested in now, are all studied by cognitive psychology. Okay, let's try and change this slide again. Okay, so and just as an aside, the things that Ryan was talking about, his skin conductance, facial expressions, electrocardiography, eye tracking, all that sort of stuff, those are techniques which were created by cognitive psychologists, right? So if you want to use these techniques, it's probably good to have some idea of the cognitive psychology that goes behind those techniques, because the cognitive psychology people have been studying this for about 80 years or so. I think that there's a case that the alternatives that people are using in tourism now are less useful for studying these mental processes. So, firstly, I mentioned this before, behavioral psychology, it's already been abandoned in mainstream psychology. In mainstream psychology, the mainstream is cognitive psychology, not behavioral psychology. There are alternatives. I remember Philip Pearce, he was a social psychologist. Very interesting. The problem with that is that it's based on sociology. And Ryan, I think I'm a bit naughty. I cut and pasted one of his slides, and he was talking about embodied and liminoid experiences. Okay, well, those are sociological terms. A limoid experience comes from a sociological theory that is connected to rites of passage, and it says as we grow and we pass through different stages of life, we are often marking those things like marriage with a particular ritual or liminal experience and or a ritual, and those rituals take us into a different world. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's an interesting sociological explanation. The problem is it doesn't explain what's happening in our head when those things are occurring. And the cognitive psychologist people will tell you about that. They'll give you some mechanisms that are important in such experiences. But the problem is, if you want to study them in cognitive psychology, you can't use the same terms or concepts that come from another field. So liminal experiences in tourism, that's a sociological term. If you want to study that in using cognitive psychology, you might say a novel situation, something that's outside your normal environment. And it is this translation of old behavioral or sociological ideas into tourism, which needs to be updated, because many of the terms we're using are related to old ideas. Neuroscience is the other area which we could think, and most people think that cognitive psychology and neuroscience are the same things. Well, they use some of the same techniques, but neuroscience is actually about predicting neuronal pathways in our brain, not large-scale processes like memory. Our brain is a cake with lots of layers. Up the top is our consciousness, which is a fully integrated set of mental processes. Then we've got memory, attention, emotion, and things. And then we've got neural pathways and stuff. And it may be interesting to understand how neuroscience can predict behavior or predict higher level mental processes, but we really haven't got there at the moment. And so neuroscience is interesting, but in fact, most of the things that people talk about neuroscience are in fact derived from cognitive psychology. So I wanted to try and, there's cognitive science, psychology is a big area, and I want to just try and sort of give you some specific examples. And the way I got into cognitive psychology was through cognitive appraisal theory. It's a way. To me, it's a very useful way of understanding what an emotion is and why we express them. I mean, basically, an emotion is just an assessment that something good is occurring, okay, or bad, good or bad. Positive emotions good, negative emotions bad. And so how do we know if something good is happening? Well, if we want to know what's good, we have to know what we want to happen, what should be happening. That's called a goal, okay? So what we do is we have a set of expectations in our head, and those expectations are our goals, the things that we think will happen or should happen or we want to happen. If they do happen, then we feel good. Something good has happened. That leads to a positive emotion. So a positive emotion comes from goal congruence. That is, something good has happened, and it's been related to a goal, therefore I will feel happy. The more important your goal is, the stronger the emotion. Okay. If something really bad has happened to you, you feel very sad. If something really good is, you feel delight. Then, though, that basic assessment of valence, goal congruence, and goal importance is moderated to some extent by the novelty of the situation and whether the situation concerns yourself or some other thing. So that's really important. It's so simple, but it's powerful. If you see a person who is angry, you don't know why they're angry, but you know something that was really important to them has not happened. And you can then deal with that. All you need to do with dealing with it is to say, well, can you tell me, what's happened that's made you angry in a good way? And that will help you to deal with the situation. So if you're talking about memorable tourism experiences, emotional experiences, you're talking about goal congruence and goal importance in a novel situation like tourism. And it usually is something that concerns yourself, which makes it even more important. So cognitive appraisal theory is a fairly simple way of really understanding what emotions are and all the things that flow from emotions, such as feelings, stress, coping, and so on. And by the way, most of our decisions are based on emotional reasons, which we then justify afterwards. So if you want to understand emotion, if you understand decision making, understand where emotions come from. This is a bit of me trying to summarize it all. And as I said, cognitive psychology studies a number of processes. Attention. Then so that's attending to things in the real world or inside our brain. So when we're talking about presence, we are talking about inwardly directed attention. Okay. Similarly, mindfulness is about attention, but it's attention to the present moment, not to the past or the future. We also talk about words like engagement or involvement. Engagement is attention. When we're talking about engaging, we mean we're paying attention to something. When we're talking about involvement, it means attention to something that's important to us. So that brings in the idea of our goals. So when we have goals, we sometimes say we have interest in a topic, or we have motives to undertake something. Those are all goal-related things. Something is of interest to us because it's something we want to happen. So
Sorry,
the goals and the
Noel.
Yep.
Sorry to just interrupt. We are just approaching the 20th minute mark.
Thank you. I'll finish this slide, and this is my last one. So thank you. So there's an appraisal, the situation, what's happening in the real world, whether it's a virtual or physical, is the situation. The appraisal of that situation based on goals and novelty lead to emotions, which we might call feelings, and may lead to stress or coping activities. And if you have a strong emotion, that is likely to lead to a strong memory. And that's what we call a memorable tourism experience. And all of those things happen within our consciousness. And consciousness is about identity or transformation of our identity, flow states, and even presence. So all of these concepts are related to the basic processes that happen in our brain. Which brings me to this great final thing. Merchandising opportunity. Anna Anna and I and Brent Moyle and Bill from Griffith have all written this great book. So I'll encourage you to read it. And rest assured, I'm not going to become rich from it, but hopefully you'll become rich in thoughts and ideas. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Scott. Definitely a very captivating and intriguing presentation that really touches I guess, the heart of what we normally do in behavior psychology. Yeah. And I must say, I'm actually guilty of it. Yeah, I do use quite a number of theory of planned behavior, SOR theories in my research. And I guess, maybe something for us to really think about. What you actually say, that the stability of attitudes, which we actually take for granted, that we assume that it stays the same, every day for the next week, month, years, and so on. And I guess, what researchers try to do to get around this is they try to introduce mediators for the attitudes, and of course to introduce moderators to try to moderate that sort of intentions to behavior. And that's quite common in sort of behavior psychology research that we have seen in obviously the last sort of 10 years and so on. So obviously something to really think about, a sort of paradigm shift in thinking about perhaps before even using certain sort of established theories. Yeah, we really have to think, is it still relevant in today's in today's, I guess, tourism environment and landscape though. Yep. So definitely something for us to really all to really digest and think about though. Yep. And I must say I'm a big fan. I've seen your comments on TriNet about this topic, and I followed closely as well. So definitely something for all of us researchers, young and old, to really think about and reconsider. Yeah. So thank you there. Yeah. All right. So moving on, we have our third panelist. Yep. Dr. Anna Campos. Yep. And she's going to share with us something also quite intriguing, about and something quite common that we actually use. Yep. In our daily lives and in our research, which is about um, the co-production or the co-experience of tourism experience. So without further ado, Anna, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So, are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Can you do a slideshow for it, or?
Yeah? Is this okay? Are you seeing the presentation or
We
not?
are seeing the presentation, but if you can click on what do you call that? Slideshow, just to make it full screen.
It's full screen.
Oh.
No, we can't see the full screen. We can only see the
Oh, sorry. What about now? Not the full screen yet?
No.
No. And now? Not the full screen?
No, it's
still the same.
Still the same. All right. Sorry. Don't know why.
Do you wanted me to share the slides from my end? Is it the same slides that you sent me?
I guess more or less. Some minor changes, but I don't know why.
Okay. Do you want to maybe give it another shot just to try it one more time?
Yeah. Just trying one more time. Sorry. Apparently, I just not able to share the full screen. I don't know why.
Okay. Yeah.
You should be able to see. Oh, Jesus. And now?
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation for being here today, celebrating the 30th birthday of the journal. And well, I'm very happy to be here with you and sharing some highlights of my PhD research. And this has been a close relationship with Noel and Noel's work on cognitive psychology. So, unlike him, that is an expert on the field, as many other people, I just feel that I am an eternal apprentice on this matter, on this subject. But in fact, my PhD revolved around this combination between the concept of the tourism experience, the co-creation concept, and the cognitive psychology approach and foundation. So I will just share some highlights with you on this journey of mine. And well, I will start a little backwards with this concept and with my need to make theoretically sense of this concept of the tourism experience. You all know and are aware that this is a very big concept in tourism studies, and it has evolved as one of the biggest research themes in tourism literature and research. However, when we are discussing the tourism experience, in fact, what are we talking about? And so this was a very big issue for me because I felt the need to understand the concept. So at some point, I bumped into this study of Odell's. Odell wrote a paper on the tourism experience and academic junctures, and in this study, he said that he didn't want to play the border police, but instead the role of the immigrant that goes back and forth from academic disciplines, and he argued that for us to study the tourism experience, in fact, we should overcome disciplinary boundaries. But he had a goal to argue for this study, and he said that he wanted to understand the tourism experience from different academic backgrounds because the tourism experience is a window of opportunity for us to understand contemporary societies and to understand the everyday life. But in fact, this was at the time no good for me because, strictly speaking, I was not that particularly interested in the understanding of the wider society, the contemporary society, or the everyday life. I just wanted to go into the concept itself. So I felt the need to move on to other readings that somehow could be closer to my needs. So I moved on and found this study by Cutler and Carmichael's publication. They wrote this very good summary on the dimensions of the tourism experience, a reading that I do recommend for each and every one of us that is interested in the study of the tourism experience and what has been done so far. But before going into the details on the models, on the constructs, on the perspectives, and so on, they just started the study with a psychology based definition of the tourism experience. And for me, I was starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with this approach. So they said, and based on some other people's work, they try to define the tourism experience on a psychological basis, and defined it in these two aspects. So we can talk about the tourism experience as the lived event, or the tourism experience as the recollected or the reflected, the evaluated event. But in either case, whatever the perspective on the experience, we are always talking about personal, subjective, and very complex and complicated psychological processes. So here I found a basis for me to try to understand the tourism experience in itself, and without the sociological concerns and so on. So this was a path that interested me and captured my attention at the time. But afterwards, I was even more happy with this study by Larsens on aspects of the psychology of the tourism experience, because here Larson clearly committed to this perspective of the scientific study of the tourism experience as based on cognitive psychology. And this for me was very important at the time, because, well, without neglecting different interests in the study of the study of the tourism experience, which may relate us to how we create value from the tourism experience, how we explore group relations within the tourism experience, how we try to understand group interaction and so on. So there are a lot of reasons for us to study the tourism experience, but this is not the core, because up to this moment, no one has ever demonstrated that the tourism experience is something that specific that requires a different discipline. So whatever experience we are talking about, we are always talking about the human experience. And so we are individuals from our birth to our end. And so we are continuously in these experiential moments and events, and only occasionally are we tourists. So the tourism experience is as any other human experience a human undergoes. So if you want to scientifically study the tourism experience, we have to go into the source of or the basis of that of that experience, which is the individual. So it clearly states that whatever behavior we want to understand, we have to go to the psychology underneath. So this was a very comfortable idea for me. And in his study is additionally and trying um, to argue for this psychological approach to the experience. He even had the care of considering the different stages, this multi-phased model of the tourism experience, considering the three main stages of the overall tourism experience. So before the travel and during the travel and after the travel, and for him to claim and emphasize that we can always apply psychological theory and science in the study of the different phenomena and processes that are occurring in these different moments. So he delivered many examples of psychological processes and phenomena that we can address and further develop in tourism research. And quoting Leiper from a previous study, he said, well, yes, we talk a lot about the destination in various types of destination attractors and features and so on, but it's not the destination that is the core of tourism. The core of tourism is the individual that travels and goes wherever he wants to go. So this is where we have to rely on if we want to study scientifically the tourism experience. So somehow I had found my foundations for my subsequent study. And so the second part of my journey, or what I was inquiring subsequently, was how to make a cognitive approach to the tourism experience. So I had by that time acknowledged that psychology was one viable way of going into this particular topic in tourism studies. So I read a lot about the literature on changes on the tourism market, and plenty of information was available by then, and we knew by then that people are looking for memorable experiences, so there are lasting memories. People wanted to feel in control. People wanted to self-develop and to become better and apply their own resources and skills. So they wanted to improve and so on. But most of all, the literature was talking about how people were interested in doing things. So tourism experiences were about more and more about people wanting to do things rather than gazing or looking at them from afar. And accordingly, the supply side of this was responding with experiential proposals focused on creative tourism experiences and co-creative tourism experiences. So, for instance, all the work developed by Greg Richards on creative tourism was completely aligned with this development, this change in the tourism market. And so I try to understand this concept of what is a tourism experience, and if there is really something specific about this, what sets this type of tourism experience apart from other ones. because if Larson is right, whether we are talking of a co-creation tourism experience or a non-co-creation tourism experience, the same should apply. It's still an experience, so we could still address the study using cognitive psychology. And eventually we put forward this definition of the co-creation tourism experience, which emphasizes the psychological processes as they occur and develop during active participation and interaction during tourism activities. So we thought that this would serve as an operational definition of co-creation tourism experiences with a psychological focus. And the question is, or was at the time, what might these psychological processes be? We know that we undergo many different psychological processes, and but we had, of course, to focus our study in some particular aspects of these psychological processes. We developed a model which focused on attention, involvement, and memorability. We delivered and proposed psychologically based definitions of these constructs, and the question is, why attention, why involvement, why memorability? As to attention, well, we know that from psychology theory and research that attention is also, of course, a collective name for more specific processes and phenomena. We have many different names for attention, or ways of describing attentional processes, such as selective attention, vigilant attention, concentrated attention, top-down attention, bottom-up attention. So there is a collection of names that try to capture the diversity of the attention phenomena as a whole. But whatever the way we address this concept in research, we know that attention plays critical importance in our lives. It matters for survival and adaptation purposes. We know about how distractions really may cost our lives. So from the individual point of view, we are always in processes of selecting the stimuli that are important for a particular context. But this is what we know from everyday life. But from the science perspective, we know also from psychology and neuroscience that are more and more connecting and collaborating in this process of developing knowledge on these related processes. We know that attention is substantially demonstrated that it is connected to learning and to memory processes and some other outcomes. Integration of new knowledge, representation, conceptualization, categorization. So there is a myriad of cognitive processes that are obviously founded on attentional processes. But in tourism, I found only 2 studies from the same person, Oy, that published as far as I know, the studies on the attention in tourism experiences, and this for me was, it sparked my interest because I had so far not seen research on this topic in tourism studies. And what it does in his studies is to um, call our attention to the fact that every tourism experience is mediated by attentional processes. Either we are looking at a national agency promotion, either we are listening to the tour guide, or we are somehow internalizing recommendations or suggestions from friends and relatives and so on. Everything is mediated by attentional processes. But at the time, no one was talking about that, and no one was doing research about that. So, and continuing, why involvement? This is another big word in tourism studies, but it started in consumer behavior literature. Consumer behavior literature, in fact, was somewhat at the beginning, at least I think, was somewhat divorced from psychology theory, and only progressively it became integrated into research on motivation, and much more recently on cognitive approaches to motivation, which are known as goal theories, for instance. And so involvement remains a very important concept in tourism research, not to mention consumer behavior in general. But yes, I think some other people think that in tourism studies, we need to translate this concept of involvement into cognitive psychology concepts. Okay, so for instance, interest or identity formation, for instance, are some of the options. And lastly,
Sorry,
why?
Emma, just to interrupt. Yeah, we are just approaching the 20th minute mark.
Okay, just going through my last slide. Why memorability? Needless to say, how memory is important for us from the personal perspective. We build identity on episodic memory, and also memory is a major field of research both in psychology and neuroscience, and also tourism. And we know that in the past few years we've just seen many publications on the memorable tourism experience. However, those studies have mostly focused on discussing the dimensions of the memorable tourism experience. So this is about memory content, not exactly about the memory processes, and that lead to higher memorability. So it's not just about understanding what people do encode and retain in memory in the long term, or the expected long term, but how these processes work for tourists during their experiences. So basically, and in general terms, implications for tourism research. So I would say and have emphasize what Larson had said some more than 10 years ago, that if you want to understand behavior without the psychology behind it, so there's no point in doing so. So we have always to connect behavior to the mind and to the cognitive processes. And also, as my research has found, this type of experiences, the called co-creative tourism experiences, are great contexts for us to understand all these cognitive processes, because people feel engaged, animated, and so they feel connected in some ways to the context of these activities. So that's it.
All right, cool. All right, thanks a lot, Anna. That's a very great presentation. Once again, yep, definitely. I think you kind of touched on some very important bits about, especially co-creation. And I guess, it brings us to right back to the question about the stability of, the attention, involvement, and memorability as well, as we talk about, and connecting it to mind and psychology and behavior. Yep. So thank you. Thanks for that presentation. All right, so
Thank you.
we have our very last presenter of the evening or day. Yeah, we have Professor Song. He's going to share with us a very intriguing topic about neuroscience and cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality. Yeah, take it away, though.
Thank you, Edmund. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, very good.
Perfect. So thank you, Edmund, and thank you everyone for staying for such a long event. But I have about 10-15 minutes to kind of quickly talk about the application of neuroscience and cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality. Now, I won't say I'm a tourism and hospitality expert. I'm actually a psychologist. So I'm a neuropsychology trained researcher. But I run the Consumer Research Lab, which conduct a number of different tourism research. And we were, unfortunately, in Australia, we were unsuccessful with the tourism CRC, but we will rebid again for that $40 million tourism CRC that will be going on in Australia very soon in the next 2 rounds. So very quickly, why do we talk about neuroscience and cognitive psychology? Well, a lot of people uses neuroscience or neuropsychology methods or psychophysiological method to actually understand cognitive psychology, not only in tourism, but in marketing, in robotics, in nursing, in fact, a number of disciplines that I worked in. So one of the reasons is because there is quite a number of different limitations of self-reported measures. These are interviews, surveys, focus groups, so on and so forth. Some of the reason is because self-reports are quite easily influenced by biases. So a lot of surveys results, they might be prone to hindsight biases or social desirability effect. Noah was talking about, if you ask people whether they will recycle at a destination, they will probably say yes, but they probably would not really say that objectively in some ways form. You could also be prone to exaggeration and falsification. So, for instance, if you ask someone, how much do you support a sustainability initiative in tourism? How much would you not wash your towels in hotels, so on and so forth? Self-reported measures are prone to falsification, right? I might say I will, but it's just an impression heuristic. I'm trying to impress people or impress the researcher. You can actually falsify, exaggerate your results or your data. It's limited by linguistic understanding. So Anna and Noel and to a certain extent Ryan also talked about a number of different psychological phenomena like emotions, flow, so on and so forth. They're very hard to actually be measured by self-reported measure. Imagine if I ask you, you're in a tourism destination, can you report your emotion every second, right? That's a very difficult thing to do in self-reported measure. But neuroscience methods, such as eye tracking, facial expression, allows you to provide second by second and even element by element insights into your data. Limited to memorable and conscious experience. So if you ask someone, how much do you like this destination? How much will you revisit this destination? Very typical tourism research kind of data points. They're only really based on memorable and conscious experience, right? They're not really looking at unconscious experience. For instance, how many seconds have you paid attention to X elements within the tourism destination? How long did you pay attention or process X amounts in towards the signages in the tourism destination, so on and so forth? You can't really look at that because some of these experiences are just unconscious, right? And they're not memorable in some sense. And obviously, at the last but not least, All the self-reported measures, like surveys, they are limited averages. There's no temporal measures. There's no temporal sensitivity towards your measurements. Just like what I said, you can't really look at a second-by-second measurement or element by element or even parts of the destination, right? If you go on a roller coaster ride, most people won't be able to tell you, even with a 3-second segment of, experience of that roller coaster ride, so on and so forth. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that self-reported measure is you can throw it out of the window. What we really want to see is that methodology is applied appropriately, right? If you're looking at unconscious responses, unconscious phenomenon, maybe focusing on neuroscience and neuropsychological methods or psychophysiological method might actually help. Where self-reported measure allows you to really dive into kind of the phenomenon, right? You can actually measure a number of different things with self-reported measure where biometric measure or neuroscience measure won't be able to allow you to do that. So that's why I'm here to kind of talk about the application and the caveats, right? Now, I only have 10, 15 minutes. I know we have to cut my presentation short because of time limit. But basically, what is consumer biometrics and neuroscience? Well, eye tracking, pupillometry. So eye tracking allows me to measure attention. Pupillometry allows me to measure cognitive processing. So not only that I can measure what you're paying attention to, but we could also look at how much cognitive processing you have that you're paying attention to this signages, to this to this element within the destination. Cardiac and electrodermal activity, so heart rate and skin inductance allows us to measure stress and engagement. So we can really measure interest or engagement, or you can call, selective attention towards particular things or that peaks, right? One of the things that I may disagree with Noel, but probably we're on the same page, is that attention and engagement probably are different. So attention, you can pay attention to something, but you're not interested in it at all, right? I could be focusing on one particular signage, but I'm not interested in processing any of those contents, so on and so forth. Emotion expression, we could actually measure your positive, negative emotions. We could now even measure discrete emotions quite accurately with the advent of AI and pretty much data sets that allows us to calibrate our algorithm as more accurately and objectively. We also have brainwave apnea. So brainwave headset, you could actually look at a number of different cognitive mechanisms. Apnea is basically measuring your blood flow based on near infrared light. It's a headband that comes across to your frontal cortex. It allows us to look at decision-making process, especially the valuation kind of processes that go through. Now, you can kind of see that I didn't really provide much of my introduction, but I actually run a lab in the Curtin University in the consumer research lab that actually specialize in this. So we actually have applied this into not only tourism clients, but also a number of different large market clients like Red Bull, if you're in Australia, RAC, RACQ, RACV, so on and so forth, those type of clients that we have actually helped them in optimizing their marketing. And obviously we do publish quite a lot in that area. To give you a bit of example, so this is an eye tracker. What you can see at the bottom of the screen, in front of the lady on the red is the eye tracker. You can see the visual attention second by second, right? You can see exactly where they're paying attention to and what they're looking at. Now, you might go, well, that's just limited to lab. Well, all the biometric measures, especially nowadays, they're all mobile, right? We have mobile eye tracking glasses, a wristband that measures skin inductance and heart rate. We have sensors that could be put on your face to measure your facial expression, or even a camera, so on and so forth. So cardiac and electrodermal activity. So this is your skin inductance, which is your sweat under your palm, and your cardiac heart rate. We are probably the only lab in Australia that has an algorithm that actually pass out a number of noises and also control for a number of proxy measures so that we can really measure engagement really accurately. And how we actually do this is basically looking at an orienting response. In fact, psychophysiological measure and neuroscience methods are not new. They have been used by psychologists for 50 years to understand consumer psychology. I'm just applying it in consumer behavior, or we are applying, because I'm not the only one, right? Facial expression analysis. I'm going through this really quickly because I think I have 6 minutes left, Edmund. You can see facial expression. This is actually a software, very old software. We don't really use it anymore. We even develop our own facial expression software these days. because it's just so easy to do in AIs now with data that is totally open accessed. But you can see the kind of the concept. You measure 56 landmarks on your face. By looking at those minute muscles, you can actually classify them into 8 different basic emotions, and positive and negative emotions are quite easy to actually detect because um, uh, uh, one of my PhD supervisor, I think 6, 7 years ago, is pretty much the one who actually invented FEMGs, right? To measure social psychology phenomenon such as racial biases, right? Using electrical activities that sense to your facial muscles to actually predict whether you have an implicit bias towards racial issues, so on and so forth. And so we know that psychologists have been using this very accurately to measure positive and negative emotions. Brainwave analysis. So really cognitive and motivational processes. I won't go through all of them, but you can look at orienting response. You can look at level of novelty. You can look at level of differences on perception. You can look at some memory processes. However, neuroscience, if you don't talk to a neuroscientist, they will probably say the literature is not very clear whether the memory process that is being measured by brainwave headsets is really retrieval or encoding, which I agree, because there's too much minute mechanism and neural mechanism within memory that is so crossover that brainwave headset, the spatial sensitivity of it is just not there to actually tell you that. If you look at an fMRI, which I do not have access to, that's probably the only machine that I don't have access to, costs about $10 million. Still trying to convince my VC to give me that $10 million plus the $3 million for the room. Probably not a very good business case for a business school, since that my university loved to shoot satellites into and rockets into space, but they couldn't afford an fMRI machine for me. But we shared with some of the hospitals around Perth and actually in China as well. We actually do quite a number of fMRI studies through that. So you might go, okay, Billy, well, very interesting, right? What can it really measure? Well, here are basically some of the measurements that we are quite confident nowadays in neuropsychology and neuroscience that we could measure, or I call it my field as consumer neuroscience. So attention by eye tracking, cognitive processing by pupillometry, emotion by facial expression, engagement and excitement by heart rate and skin inductance. As I said, memory processes, but not exactly retrieval and retention. We could kind of measure psychological control by heart rate variability. This is quite interesting in behavioral change. So whether the person actually feel the sense of control psychologically. If you talk to some social psychologists, they probably go, or social neuroscientists, they'll probably go, we're not there yet, but we are quite confident that we can pass that out, and stress and psychological arousals. Now, as I said, I'm not saying that neuroscience is end all and be all. We actually in the lab really look at research triangulation. We actually look at a behavioral measurement and an interview or survey or self-reported measure to actually triangulate what we call a business or research objective. So every single method has its own limitation, and that's actually also why I'm here to talk about the caveats of applying neuroscience or consumer neuroscience or biometrics or psychophysiological measures in tourism research. I don't think I'll have time to go through all of these. So why consumer biometric and neuroscience? Well, we have the second by second insights. It measures not only second by second, actually millisecond by millisecond if you're in the lab. It actually uncovers difficult to report responses. So it can really measure emotions. So if you ask your consumer or your tourist, are you happy or excited? They will be like, well, they're kind of similar emotion. But if you're an emotion researcher, I can tell you, you would really hit a very big debate. Joy and excitement are very, very different emotions. And in fact, evolutionary functional theory suggests that they serve very much different functions. That is why we have different emotions, right? You don't just have emotion, you have emotion because you evolve to have emotion. And so every single emotion should have its own function. Granular data on unconscious responses, so you can look at attention, right? Instead of asking people what do you recall, you actually ask them what they pay attention to, or you can actually ask the question of what objectively they actually pay attention to. And interestingly enough, because I saw Ryan's presentation, we could also integrate this into mixed reality. And I'll show you an application of it. I don't have it in tourism. I don't think I'll go through this example. Here are some tourism examples that we have done. One of them is signages or safety signages in WA's parks. You can see no one pay attention to the new sign. I won't say which minister actually commissioned this project. I don't think he's probably very happy about that because it's his idea to make signages in park Instagrammable. We basically show that empirically it doesn't work. Probably stick with the the old signages, which has been tested by safety scientists for I don't know more than 100 years. They actually work much better. But you could also see some optimization of visitor experience. So as part of some of the work that we do at Curtin University, we work with tourism researchers as well. This one, you can see the mobile equipment that is being used. We can look at, arousal, for instance, in a destination, and whether there's significant increases in, let's say, arousal or psychological arousal in which part and where. And if you pair it with eye tracking, you can look at what kind of elements actually arouses people psychologically, right? This is not a tourism as destination, but we actually have done some AR study with some tourism destination. Some of them I can't show is because of commercial confidentiality, but this one I could show because it is actually Horizon Sunshine. So if you have played the zombie game from US, we actually worked with a developer about 5 years ago before they launched the game. 6 months before they launched the game, we actually looked at gameplay design for them. And so you can see the face, we actually measuring facial expression using sensors, skin inductance using a wristband, sorry, not a wristband, the finger sensors, heart rate using actually the triangle method that we use in the sensors. And so she's actually wearing all these sensors while playing this game. And if you could imagine, right, a tourism destination, you could do that, right? Go through every single segment. You could look at experiences. You can look at flow states, so on and so forth. Very quickly, I mean, this is my last slide. You'll be very happy to see that. So some of the limitation of consumer neuroscience. In fact, one of them that is not in this slide is actually there is actually not a lot of experts within tourism, marketing, or consumer behavior or consumer or business research that actually can review these type of articles. In fact, you look at some tourism and business research that kind of use neuroscience. If you give it to a neuroscientist or a psychologist, they probably will burst out crying because the methodology is so poorly designed or poorly used. And so there are a number of papers within psychology and even in business nowadays that really shows what is the best practices of using these methods and what are some of the reporting standard for these methods. And I would strongly encourage you to actually consult these if you do happen to come into this methodology. But some of the limitation of psychophysiological measure, limited sample size, right? Imagine 500 survey versus 30 consumers going through consumer neuroscience research, right? Using biometrics, you probably can only, because of time, it takes about 10 minutes to set up each participant. You can show them some stimuli. There's fatigue, so maybe 60 minutes, and you have to do it one by one. In my lab, we can do 4 at a time, but you still have very limited sample size. And generally, you probably need to have physical contact with the respondent because you can't really do it online. There are online biometric methods. We do use it in the lab as well, but they're not that accurate and objective. There's lack of quantitative data to address different theoretical concepts. So for instance, if you're looking at different theory, like theory of planned behavior or, a memorable experience, there's, I think, 8 dimensions of memorable experience. We can't measure all that. Self-reported measure can. Consumer biometrics, you'll never be able to do that. You'll never be able to measure the 4 dimensions of immersiveness or flow state, as Ryan said. There's just no way you can do that. It's not that minute. There's lack of rich qualitative explanation for biometric responses. So maybe you get an arousal response, but you have no idea why that is the case, right? And that is why triangulation is very important, using both quantitative and qualitative methods to actually triangulate that. Averaging across dynamic stimulus may not be appropriate. So for instance, if you have a dynamic stimulus like an ad, a lot of current research in biometrics is averages out, which loses the temporal sensitivity. Not a very good idea using biometrics that way. And really, there's no consideration of context, right? One of the biggest argument that the biggest psychologists or the most famous psychologists that against biometrics is that, well, you can smile, right? If you see someone in the funeral smiling, you're not going to interpret it as happiness. So biometric measurements are flawed. But my argument, or a lot of psychologists' argument, is that, well, there's no consideration of context, right? If you take away that interpretation of human interpretation or that human supervision or researcher supervision, and without considering the context, of course, you'll have misinterpretation. But what you're seeing is that someone is actually using a smile to cover the sadness in a funeral, right? It's the same thing if we actually take out the context and biometric doesn't provide a context, and it still requires that human subjectivity or the researcher's subjectivity to actually answer or address some of the meanings out of the biometric data. So that's all for me. I planned for a 20-minute presentation, but I think I finished in 13, 14 minutes. So I count that as a plus. But yes, back to
But
you.
thanks a lot, Billy. I mean, if we were to measure your heart rate now, I'm sure it must be pumping. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, once again, thanks again for this one fantastic insights about all this exciting research and applications that you are doing, and how we can use some of these biometrics measurements in tourism and hospitality there. Yep. So once again, thanks you for all the panelists for your critical insights into the progress and usefulness of cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality experiences. I guess now we'll open up for Q&A, and I must say that we are running out of time, but I'm committed to stay here and to answer every single question. Yep, even though if we exceed the time limit, okay. So please feel free to continue to send in your questions there. All right. Okay, so I think we have one question. I'm just trying to pull up my chat. Yep, and it is from Germana Torres. Yep, she's from University of Coimbra in Portugal. Yep, she would like to ask the question about what is your opinion about the usage of AI for the management of tourist attractions, namely World Heritage sites? Yep, so I'm not sure who wants to take on this question, but pretty much it's about how can you use AI, yep, for the management of tourist attractions at World Heritage sites. Yep, any of our panelists?
I can't really answer that one. I don't know much about AI. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I think admin, I wouldn't call myself an expert of AI, and probably not something we really discussed it in this events. But I would say with my, I guess, let's say limited knowledge around AI, actually I do have a startup that actually specializes in AI, but definitely not in management of tourism attraction. But I think AI should be used cautiously. A lot of people think ChatGPT has actually have intelligence, so artificial intelligence. ChatGPT does not have intelligence. It's a large language model. It's a predictive analytic. It just predicts the best word, right? It feels like it has intelligence, but it does not have intelligence at all. Even if you talk to OpenAI, they would never say OpenAI, ChatGPT has artificial intelligence. So use it with caution, and I guess it's great to use for tedious tasks. So for instance, I don't know, coming up with a CRM system that cold call people easy, but definitely not be able to manage a whole site of tourism, especially a World Heritage sites. This is difficult to kind of imagine how an AI can manage that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess does anyone have a question that they want to ask live? Yep. They want to speak through the mic. Anyone? The question that you wanted to ask? Yeah. I got a question that was sent through my email, saying that the panelists mentioned lots about trends and usefulness and so on. So what is the next big thing in cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality? Yeah. So what is I guess the next big thing, I would assume, referring to like up and coming contemporary innovative trends, or what is the next big thing in cognitive cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality. Yeah, because I know Noah Scott talks a lot about the theory behind it. Billy coming from an angle whereby he talks a lot about the technology and techniques to actually measure this. I know Anna talks a bit about the importance of involving both, um, the tourist, the consumer, and industry partners to actually, or the tourism providers to actually come together to actually provide this joint core experience. Yep, but I guess maybe we can have one or couple of ideas from the panelists. If you have a crystal ball, asking, what if you ask AI, ChatGPT, what is the next big thing in cognitive psychology in tourism and hospitality? What would it be then? Yeah.
If I had to answer that question, I mean, certainly technologies, virtual reality, the power of computing, that's all bringing rich and engaging experiences for people. But the future is always about thesis and antithesis. As much as people are engaging with all this technology, some people really want to get away from it. And tourism is sort of probably one of those big areas where there'll be a bit of both. There'll be enhancement through virtual or augmented reality as one growth area, and then, but as well, authentic, individualized experiences of a unique nature are also something that I think people are looking at. Those are sort of trends in the business of tourism. In the theory of tourism and the areas for academic study, there does seem to be a lot of interest in positive psychology, wellness, spirituality, and how tourism sort of fits into all that. So there's a number of different areas, both in the business of tourism as well as the academic area. Those would be my suggestions.
Yeah. Billy or Anna, have anything to add to this? The next big thing?
Yeah, I think I'll approach it in two different ways. I think theoretically it's interesting to actually look at cognitive psychology in some ways, but I think I would take a bit of a step back and actually looking at more the psychological mechanism that underlays some of the tourist behavior. I think as I said, my disclaimer is I'm not an expert in tourism and tourism literature. I do publish in tourism, and I work with tourism researcher. But I think a lot of literature looks at really around the consequences of the behaviors. So you do this, let's say promotion, or you do X, it will lead to this tourist behavior. But I think one big thing is really looking at, what is really the psychological mechanism that underlays it, and is there any explanation of that, that the process that goes through to I guess in the tourist mind. But I think that's the theoretical side. But practical side, I think a lot of the time, I would say the next big thing is actually that share agencies. So as you could probably appreciate, even nowadays, you could actually go on and kind of an AI or a machine learning algorithm actually picks your tourism destination or tourism itinerary. You have, tourism destination recommendation from AI, so on and so forth. A lot of the time, what we'll see is that the advancement of technology will have a lot of the tasks that tourists need to do by themselves pre, during, and even after a tourist experience will be taken over by technology, or at least assisted by technology. And I think one big thing that I would probably say from a cognitive psychology perspective is actually looking at, I guess, not only the psychological mechanism, but also that shared agency. How do human actually, not only in tourism, but how does human actually alleviate or I guess, experience that shared agency with technology and AI, and all these other different advances in technology, where they actually share a particular task, I guess, before, during, and after a tourism experience.
Okay. All right. Anna, do you want to, I see you keep moving towards the mic. Do you have something you wanted to add to this?
I would say that in terms of tourism studies, for me, one big thing would be the dissemination of the cognitive psychology approach to the study of tourism, and also that tourism researchers somehow would collaborate to the effort of bridging cognitive psychology and neuroscience efforts in producing good quality research for us to benefit from.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Spot on. Yeah. All right. We have one question that just came in, and this question is directed to Professor Scott. Yep. It's from Fang Yu Liu. Yep. I have a question for Professor Scott. Many studies in cognitive psychology related to tourism primarily focus on the influence of psychological processes on behavior intentions. I was wondering if you believe it would be beneficial for us to explore more research at the behavioral level. If so, what potential directions might you suggest? Yeah. So I guess the question is more about lots of studies in tourism always examine behavior intentions rather than actual behavior. Yeah. So yes.
Okay. So the problem, there's nothing wrong with studying intention. It tells you something, probably something on average that if more people intend to do this than that, A than B, then it's going to be more popular. But in uh, if you actually go into individual behavior, you find that a lot of the behavioral intention literature comes or studies are based on the theory of planned behavior. And unfortunately, the guy who came up with the theory of planned behavior, Asgen, in 2019 wrote a paper with a guy called Kruglowski and basically said, I was wrong. The theory of planned behavior doesn't work. Okay. So if you're reading papers on theory of planned behavior, they're wrong, and they typically work on intention because intention's supposed to be a proxy for behavior, and it's not. It's a nice idea of something that I might want to do, but it doesn't actually. It's not very predictive, and Asgen has admitted that. What do you do instead? Well, I think one of the things, if you want to predict what people are going to do in the future, you might be able to understand what's important to them. So, or something about their prior behavior. So, the best predictor of environmental actions in future is environmental actions in the past. So people do tend to have some continuity in their behavior in certain ways. Or if you want to understand maybe a person's reactions to a football game or a baseball game, how much they'll be excited, you might want to look at how important that team is to them. Or for travel, or for tourism, the importance of a trip to that person? Is it another trip that they've been on many times, or is it something that's to overseas to a unique country, which is really important? Those differences will predict different behavior in the destination or during a match. So there's nothing wrong with trying to predict behavior. It's just that the things that people have been using in the past don't work very well. And I'd suggest that one of the really good things to do is to think about importance or prior behavior as predictors of future behavior.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Noah. We have another question that came in from Felicia. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I'm a PhD student majoring in wellness tourism marketing. I am writing a paper about virtual wellness tourism experience from the positive psychology perspective. Can I know what are the differences between cognitive psychology and positive psychology? Could you give me some suggestions about how to get it done so that my paper can be accepted in a good journal? Yeah, so I guess this question is really about wellness, virtual wellness tourism experience, and what are the key differences between cognitive psychology and positive psychology? Yeah, I'm not sure who wants to take on this question. Maybe Billy, I want to take on the virtual part of it, so the virtual wellness tourism experience. Is there a way to measure it, perhaps?
I guess, yeah, if I jump in to answer that, I think wellness or well-being in some sense it's actually quite a multi-dimensional measurements. But if we are looking at, let's say, wellness tourism marketing, I don't know, I don't have the specifics around what the conceptualization is and the methodology or design, but certainly we could measure, positive emotions that have been experienced through consumer biometrics and through consumer biometrics, neuroscience or psychophysiological measurements. But I think I mean, if you have access to those measurements, it would be quite interesting to look into that. But I would say it really depends on, I guess, the design and then I guess the research question around that PhD or that paper that we're talking about. I think I would defer to Anna and Noel in regards to kind of the conceptual, because I wouldn't call myself a tourism researcher in any case.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, because I think in terms of virtual wellness tourism experience, I guess you kind of have to experience it physically. So to do it virtually is actually quite a challenge in itself. Yep. But I guess I'll leave the question for either Noah or Anna to answer, is about what are the differences between cognitive psychology and positive psychology?
Anna, may I say? Do you want to say something, Anna?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Positive psychology, to me, and this is where I get myself into trouble. I'm sorry, but to me, positive psychology is wishful thinking. The actual experimental basis of a wellness it's sort of like aspirational. Here is an ideal state that people can achieve. Let's call it in Maslow's hierarchy, the top thing. That's what we can achieve. And positive psychology then says, well, everyone should be like that, or that's what we all aspire to. And in fact, I don't know if that's true. Or in fact, certainly, I don't know if it's realistic to think that everyone can have a flourishing life. Or in fact, if everyone having a flourishing life is the best for all people. But whatever it is, what positive psychology is trying to do is saying, given that everyone wants to flourish, what can we do to achieve that? And that's not a good scientific program. It's sort of like making an assumption about something that we want to achieve and then seeing how far we can go. The actual situation is that most people are pretty happy. There have been studies of happiness in the world, and most people are pretty happy. They're happy if they're in the slums of Calcutta, or they're pretty happy if they're in America. And so the whole idea of positive psychology, to me, has a bit of a experimental gap in terms of what are we actually measuring and can we achieve it? Certainly in terms of tourism, we do know that when people go on holidays, they come back and they say that they're pretty happy. Their well-being has increased. Let's just call it happiness. And but that fades. It fades after about 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. And it's a little bit better than the same people having a holiday at home, but not that much. So tourism. So what do we mean by well-being? There's a lot of debate. Eudaimonic well-being or hedonic well-being. Certainly, tourism's got a bit of a problem for the majority of tourists in producing eudaimonic well-being. It is good at producing happiness in terms of people having fun and enjoying their holiday. But perhaps, but to me, wellness and well-being are poorly conceptualized, and there's a little bit of an assumption underpinning them. One interesting area that we've been looking at recently is the idea of eudaimonic well-being being related to self-identity and self-identity change or ideal self, and hedonic well-being being related to self-esteem and feeling good about yourself. So to me, and in fact, the positive psychology people admit that their theories, they have no theories of their own in positive psychology. The theories that they use come from other parts of psychology, and that their concepts are poorly conceptualized. So what I think, and this is my theme, I'm sorry to keep on going, is if you want to study well-being, translate it into concepts that you can study that are well defined, that you can actually study well. Well-being is in fact it's an opinion, it's a belief about yourself, and it's like studying attitudes or something. So my suggestion, if I could make a suggestion about what I would study for well-being, I'd be looking at studying self-esteem and change in self-esteem from a holiday. Hope that helps.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Noel. All right, we have one question that just came in from Ali. Yeah, this is thank you for the great panels, and this question is also directed to Professor Scott. Yep. I have a question about Professor Scott's model, which starts with goals and novelty. Where is the position and effect of other factors like personality, culture, or brand in this great model?
Great question. Thank you. So you see, this comes back to this whole idea about cognitive psychology and your your starting point. There are many words and many things that people have studied in the past, like personality and culture and brand. Okay. And they're all related to particular theories or models from the past. Culture comes from sociology or even anthropology. And the idea is that a group of people think the same things and have the same beliefs and actions, which is certainly true in the past, or more so in the past, but less so. People tend to be, as in certain countries, more individualistic these days. So, so, but even then, the whole point is culture is is not an object that exists. Well, in terms of cognitive psychology, culture is not an object that exists independent of a person's brain. Okay. So if you're studying culture, what you're doing is you're studying people's thinking, which is common with other people in that same culture. So the concept of culture is secondary in cognitive psychology because it doesn't exist except to the extent that people have individual ways of thinking which are similar to other people's. Personality is an interesting concept. Again, it comes from early psychology. It says that our personality develops over time and is remarkably stable. And that is true, except that we do know that people have different personalities, let's say different identities in different situations. So the idea that a personality is something that is fixed and always the same is actually incorrect. And we do know that people behave one way at work and one way at home. What do we mean by personality? Do we mean that they act the same in every situation? Well, they don't. So is the concept of personality useful? Perhaps we can replace that with a concept which is like personality, but we'll call it identity, and we'll say identity can be adapted or is different in different situations. Brand, brand in so what I'm doing is I'm translating. I'm taking ideas that we talk about often, personality, culture, or brand, and trying to translate them into this different language, this different way of thinking. Brand is well, I don't know. It's certainly something about memory, and perhaps it's something that draws attention. I'm not sure. It's something that has a meaning. So brand as an idea is connected to two or three different processes in cognitive psychology. So
such as representation or conceptualization or categorization. So this has translation into cognitive psychology. So
exactly.
Brand in itself is a concept from marketing and consumer behavior, but it's disconnected from the cognitive psychology literature.
Mm. And
Sorry,
that is
sorry.
Thank you, Anna. That's wonderful. And you're quite right. In tourism, we tend to use theories and concepts in a mix and match way. We grab them from different areas and use them without understanding their backgrounds and their assumptions, so on. So each one of those ideas is interesting. Cognitive psychology can help with it, but it really is about actually thinking deeply from a cognitive psychology perspective about what we mean by these concepts. Hope that helps.
No, that's a great answer to this question. Yeah. Oh, okay, let me check if there's any more. All right, I think we have come to an end. There's no more other questions. Look, great engagement. We could be here for the next, sort of 1 hour or so, but I think everyone needs to get back to their life and so on. We have been here for quite some time. I guess just to kind of summarize the whole thing is, first of all, thank you to all the wonderful panelists and distinguished delegates for their attendance, and of course, insightful presentations from our panelists. Needless to say, very valuable contributions and all the engagements and questions. I wanted to make a short announcement about a special issue that is coming out in 2025 as part of our 30th birthday anniversary. So there's going to be a special issue coming up sometime early next year, we hope, depending on the manuscripts and how fast we process all of them. But there's going to be 7 critical insights perspective papers that touches on each of these webinars that we have been talking about over the last few weeks and in the next few weeks as well. Yep. And of course, given the response that we've been getting in today's webinar about cognitive psychology, there will be a special issue about cognitive psychology and the progress and the state of play of cognitive psychology. Yep. And it's no other than Professor Noah Scott and Dr. Anna Campos. They'll be writing a perspective paper on this. So if you have missed out on today's session, or if you would like to find out more about today's sessions, stay tuned for the special issue that is coming out sometime in early 2025. All right. Okay. So once again, on behalf of JHTM and our chief editor, Professor Sigala, thank you for all your support to JHTM over the last 30 years. Yep. And please continue to support us. We want your manuscript, good quality manuscripts, and we actually want you to help us to review papers as well. And thank you for connecting with us. Yeah. So thanks a lot and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Okay.
Give yourself
Thank
a big
you.
round of applause.
Thanks,
All right.
Edmund. Well moderated.
Thank,
And
Right.
thanks,
Thank
Billy.
you.
Thanks, Anna.
All right. Thanks a lot.
thank
And
you.
see you guys. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, I'm Jie Gao from San Jose State University. Today, my presentation will be about emotion regulation research in hospitality and tourism, how we can use emotion regulation strategies from sad to happy. Specifically, I will talk about the dynamic perspective of emotion research. which is from the concept of emotion regulation. And I will just focus on emotion regulation, talk about the existing research. And based on this existing research, what are the research gaps? And also I will post some future research lines. So instead of thinking emotions as a static concept, emotion regulation introduces us a dynamic perspective of looking at emotions. So emotion regulation allowing us to look at an emotion from its generation, and then we can do a lot of things to regulate an emotion, including initiating, inhibiting, or modulating a state of mind or an emotion in a given situation. In terms of its magnitude and duration of an emotion, there are two ways we can regulate our emotions: up regulation and down regulation. This is a figure showing a dynamic process of a tourist emotion regulation strategies. As you can see from here, there are 5 regulation points that we can do to regulate our emotions, from situation selection, situation modification, attentional deployment, cognitive change, and response modulation. And this is a research I have been done in the past years to understand a tourist emotion regulation strategies, and has found a variety of regulation strategies that a tourist can use during a leisure travel. And there are 2 related concepts with emotion regulation. One is called emotional labor, which is specifically focused on the workplace, that employees to regulate their emotions, to meet job-related emotional expectation. And another related is emotional intelligence, which refers to manage and navigate both personal and social emotional dynamics. Compared with these 2 concepts, emotion regulation is a broader concept to manage emotions in any context. The existing research. So I will talk about the existing research from 3 perspectives. The first is from a tourist perspective. So I have been conducting research to understand tourist emotion regulation strategies, how their emotion change, what kind of strategies they can use during vacations to manage their emotions and impact and improve their well-being in travel and tourism. The second perspective is in the service context. Research has shown that the customers can regulate their emotions during service failures, and also it will impact on their service recovery. From the employees' perspective, evidence also shows employees' emotion regulation will impact their customers' satisfaction and experience in hospitality and tourism. And also, the well-being interventions and resilience building program will also help employees manage their emotion regulation. And also, there has been found there are some cultural differences that will shape how employees manage their emotions. Based on this existing research and evidence, there are some research gaps. I will also talk about from these 3 perspectives. The first, from the tourist perspective. While there's much research talk about the tourist and how they will use emotion regulation during a travel. However, more longitudinal research are needed to understand how tourist emotion regulation evolves over time. And also, more research is needed to understand how tourists manage emotions during repeated visits or different phases of their travel and vacation. In the second, in the service context, so the automation and digital tools are changing how customers interact with employees. So research is needed to understand how this shifts affects the emotional dynamics of service interaction and how they would contribute to employees' well-being. And third, from the employees' perspective. So the first is we want to understand more the context-specific emotion regulation. For example, the employees in different roles. For example, the frontline employees or the management, how they will manage their emotions when facing their unique emotional demands. So more research is needed to understand how these variations affect emotion regulation and how tailored interventions can support employees. And the second is the technology, how the intersection of technology and emotion regulation. Since the rise of automation, AI, and chatbots is transforming customer service. So there is a need to understand how these technologies alter emotional dynamics, reduce face-to-face interaction, and contribute to emotional well-being. In terms of the positive emotion regulation, so most research just focuses on negative outcomes of emotional labor. So future research might want to look at how employees can foster this resilience, create a positive environment, and engage in constructive emotional management. Lastly, there is limited long-term research on interventions. Future research might just want to evaluate the lasting impacts of these interventions on employees' emotion regulation and well-being. Based on this research gaps that we just talked about, now I'm sharing some future research ideas and lines. Primarily from the technology perspective, since we are talking about AI a lot nowadays. So I have been thinking about how AI can relate it to emotion research, how it will impact emotion research. So first, I'm thinking about AI-assisted emotion regulation research because we have so many high-tech technologies. For example, wearable devices and emotional sensing technologies can help us to monitor emotions and its change and prompt interventions. And also, based on this information we got using this technology, we can understand emotion regulation, the impact on our well-being and job performance. The second line of future research is related to AI-powered emotional monitoring and analytics. Since AI can tailor training programs to enhance emotional intelligence and resilience, adjusting based on real-time emotional data. So this could improve long-term employee well-being by providing customer support. And also, AI algorithm can detect patterns of emotional regulation and emotional patterns, allow for early interventions to prevent burnout. So these models can offer insights for more proactive emotional management in the workplace for employees. And in terms of the workplace, work environment, and employee management, with AI taking over administrative tasks, leaders can prioritize emotional regulation and thus to providing a supportive work environment. So future research might want to look at how AI shapes leadership roles, allowing leaders to focus on interpersonal dynamics and emotional well-being. Second, in terms of virtual work and remote work, as we know, AI is transforming virtual work environments, particularly in remote hospitality services, where it supports emotional labor and regulation. So future research might want to look at how AI changed the nature of emotional regulation and emotional labor in virtual and remote work settings, impacting both employees' experience and customer satisfaction. Third, in terms of conflict resolution, since we have AI technology that may assist in managing conflicts and regulating emotions in the workplace, so future research might want to look at the real-time data for emotional regulation and using this AI and how it impacts employees' abilities to resolve conflicts and maintain their emotional balance. Finally, so as AI become more integrated into emotional charged roles, employees face the challenges of emotional detachment or adapting new emotional expression. So future research may want to look at how workers adjust emotionally to working alongside AI technology. Last, as we are trying to understand emotion regulation in the context of consumer interaction, so in this line of research, we are using AI tools to analyze customer feedback in real time. Thus, we can understand like how employees' emotional change might impact customers' satisfaction. So future research might want to collect real-time data using AI tools to understand the impact, and also this AI-enhanced feedback we allow for like real-time adjustment and quick adjustment in emotional regulation strategies that will impacting overall service quality and employee behavior. And lastly, emotional aware system. So as AI system can detect and respond to customer emotions, so helping employees manage emotionally charged interaction. So future research might want to look at the impact of the burden of emotional labor on employees by using the emotional aware system powered by AI, and to also want to understand the impact of such AI system on employees' well-being and customers' experience. That's everything for today's presentation. Thank you.